My Duke, yes sir. Yes, and then so my peasants do all my work, right? So peasants do my work here.
There, and then should be good for my turn. Yep, and then you guys figure it out. Replay that card. And then I'll
pretty good. Peasants doing pretty good.
What are you guys doing, huh? You cheeky guys, you're going attack or defend, huh?
Didn't do any actions yet? Yeah.
Kingdom building across decades. Simultaneous play. What a combination, right? So watch your friends take their turns on your turns in this game for 1 to 5, as you take on the role of dukes, trade masters, or yes, even peasants to have the best kingdom within 1.5 hours. Here's a quick how to play. We're all trying to get the most true marks or victory points in our kingdoms over the course of 3 decades of 10 rounds each. To do that, you want to create the most sets in your kingdoms. So like, let's say we had a town set here and then a grain set over here, and that would move these true marks up by 1 grain and 1 town. But also you can buy these dominions, which are like ways to boost these marks as well. So we have military here, that would boost this military up by 1 late game. Each year has you doing 2 actions. Like one would be drawing more cards, or another playing a card down. So when you play cards, you're really just setting those up to be completed as they get built over the course of multiple rounds. There's also a bunch of free actions you can play from your hand, or like paying gold to peek and foresee at the upcoming events. Oh, and then during this phase of actions and free actions, the game is entirely simultaneous, so no waiting for anyone's turn during this phase. After everyone finishes their actions, they're all gonna pick a stance to prepare for the upcoming face down year card. If you have income stance, you get money guaranteed, yay. But sometimes you wanna pick defense, because that can help defend your kingdom if there's a warfare card that gets flipped. Yeah, these warfares are the bad thing, where it'll make you delete 1 card from your kingdom. Man, that sucks, unless you defended against it with the stance. Then, they'll do damage to your kingdom equal to what round they're on. So round 2, they'll do 2 damage, round 9, they'll do 9 damage. You take damage by losing gold, discarding from your hand, or putting your kingdom cards to ruination. Most of the time though at your end, there will be a good result, like a harvest. This is where you get that money for each of your completed sets in your kingdom. So if you have 1 set of grain and 2 sets of cities, you get 3 gold. Regardless of good or bad end of year card that everyone resolves simultaneously, then everyone just flips their stance card back over and starts the next round by progressing every single thing in their build queue. Then you repeat the whole process of doing 2 actions for the next year simultaneously. Once the entire decade ends after the 10th year, all of everyone's cards get removed, and any completed sets just move up your kingdom achievements. Now let's talk about that medieval gold. And to use all that cash being dumped into your coffers, how about upgrading your status in life? That's right, you commoner, you can buy your way up the hierarchy. So spend that money as an action, and bam, you are now a squire. Eventually, you can even make your way all the way up to a king. But that's not going to be easy and is entirely optional. You can also use your hard-earned coin to buy some land in dominions. Now let's get to the end game in the last year of the last round. You just secretly orient your dominions to boost 1 category. Then everyone flips at the same time and adjusts their achievements. If you have first place in any category, including ties, you get 3 points. If you get second place, also including ties, you get 2 points. Most points throughout all categories wins the game. Let's get into this kingdom builder where you're buying dominions. And first off, this game looks pretty medievally good. All the Endeavor, or normal cards, have this neat double-sided look to them, which is very economical. And I just can't stop laughing at these peasants just hanging out on this card. You can clearly see the army of them in your kingdom, just ready to do your bidding. Yes. Sometimes when you're a peasant yourself with this collection of clear rank cards that have these game's phases clearly shown on them. And all the cards feel good in the hand and the money tokens as well to get that simultaneous play going smoothly. As such, it's always pretty easy to tell what your other peasant friends are doing within the simultaneous phases here. Then, when you flip those middle year cards to see what happens to everyone, the colors are super distinguishable. The cards are also extremely well defined in this land booklet that even tells you the rarity of each. If you get tripped up on any of the definitions too, there's a very comprehensive glossary at the back of the rulebook. Now let's praise the main engine of the game, the progress mechanic to have kingdom building feel very natural and thematic throughout. You're round on round moving up cards, making it feel like your kingdom is always having novel stuff happening. even though you're still doing 2 actions a turn. At its most basic level, you want to make sure you're completing sets ASAP to get the money every time a harvest is triggered at end of year. But sometimes you just don't have the matching cards you need in your hand, so there's a question of whether you should take an action to draw more cards or work to build sets with what you have in your hand already. When in doubt, just remember that you probably want to have something moving up every single year. That's not close to all you do, because there's free actions to oil up and grease your turns. Like, see these trained swordsmen? How about just sending them off to go fight some imaginary enemy? Go fight, my soldiers! And when they return, they bring back their plunder for your money. Back in your kingdom, built towns can exhaust extra grain cards to gain supply tokens that can be sold later. So that's giving you an incentive to build extra grain if you want to supply up. But if you're at 7 grain, well, that's almost 2 sets completed, so maybe you don't want to exhaust it and just focus on completing your second set of 4. But this grain is double-sided to show the hard-working peasant. This expendable worker is seriously awesome and makes this game's free actions explode. It has a build time of 0, so you can play it immediately from your hand, and then you can exhaust him to do grunt work, called expediting. This lets you speed up time, so peasants activate expedite too, so you can move up 2 cards 1 space, or 1 card 2 spaces. You can probably see how this starts to get actually bonkers as your kingdom develops, as you can have 3 peasants just bouncing around between being ready or exhausted as you force them to go to work again and again as the years go on and on. Like, if we combine all the free actions we have so far, let's say we move down all these at the start of a round. Then we can use a peasant exhaust to expedite a grain down to get a surplus wheat in our kingdom. Then we can use the town to exhaust the surplus grain to get a supply. This was a 3-card interaction, and you haven't done any actual actions yet. These were all free actions. Then combine these with these other free actions, like trading in 2 cards to draw 1 card, or just draw 1 card by spending gold. Or there's these one-time use opportunities you'll receive as rewards throughout the game. And so you have so many things available to you for free actions. And do you like to spend money? Well, you can pay to accelerate time, just like in Clash of Clans or whatever the heck you play on your phone on the toilet. Spend 1 gold to expedite 1 card as a free action. And you can do this as many times as you want, so that's a lot of weighing the value of money compared to the build time of cards. Spend, spend, spend. But it's not all just fun and games partying in your kingdom while the peasants work, because, well, defense matters for your kingdom. At the end of rounds, you're flipping over these face-down cards, which could be a great harvest, or it could be a warfare. And if you're not prepared for that warfare, then your stuff in your kingdom here can get wrecked. So this is a cheeky risk-reward system where, sure, if you don't get attacked and you built tons of farmland and quarries, you'll be rich. But that's pretty greedy because you're defenseless for the random end-of-year attacks. And remember, the later the warfare comes, the worse it is for your kingdom. Gosh, the swing of 9 damage brings ruin to pacifists. Those aren't going to get repaired anytime soon. So now building sets is multifaceted. Not only do you have to worry about building defenses, like fortifications that suck for your economy, but you're constantly playing this game of chicken every round. You could go into defensive stance to help stop damage, especially as rounds ramp up and you have more in your kingdom to lose, but losing your gold income from the gimme money stance is not fun. And then here's another payoff with money. You can actually spend your entire turn, or spend 5 gold as a free action, to foresee the future of the next 3-year cards. Now this is wild because you're spending a lot, but now you know exactly when to defend, or when certain harvests will happen. Like, oh dang, that's a super growth for grain, and an extra harvest. So I better sow some grain seeds to prepare. Or if you're a cheapskate like me, you can do the sneaky thing of just watching others foresee and reading their facial expressions. So this is one of the key player interactions, where you can just really watch them throughout the next couple rounds to see how they're reacting to upcoming rounds. Or maybe they just have a really good poker face and then you just watch another person that foresaw. Either way, this foresee mechanic uses that in-person element well. Oh yeah, that was a lot of mechanics praise there without cutting back to me, because there's just a lot of options to do on your turn that are pretty much all viable at any time. So let's see how this all progresses. Yeah, so just as a progress of everything in your kingdom suggests, your kingdom will just feel so good and expanding those money-making sets. And then you have all these free actions as the years go on. It's very common to see cash go from 1 a round to 4 or 5. So yeah, cha-ching. And then you can buy a Dominion. And that can give you an opportunity card to do more free actions. Oh yeah, that's injecting a fun boost of tempo into my kingdom. You also get free opportunity cards from ranking up to become a more pompous person. Ranking up is a thoughtful game-long progression system, where ranks have their own characteristics. It's expensive and you have to evaluate how pompous you want to go. You could just rank up twice and be a trade master who unlocks special abilities for opportunity cards. And every time he gets these cards, he draws 2 and picks 1. But he is still just a mere commoner! The lofty Lord of Dominion scoffs at that with his doubled income a turn. And then if you sacrifice swordsmen, or peasants, out for your narcissism during a warfare, you can ascend to a king or queen, and then you get 3 actions a turn. That's 3 peasants you can play from your hand. Being nobility and making fun of the commoners feels quite exclusive. Only you can build gem mines, which are a wild set of 1. A set of 1. Just be careful for barbarians coming in and hurting you if you have gem mines. There's also this clean progression between decades as you clean up your sets and score them here. So as you're moving these up, these can unlock things like, say your swordsman build time is now 1. It's only 1 to build a swordsman now. There's also progression between these decades where the 3rd decade will have the nastiest warfare cards, so you gotta watch out for those. Because of how scoring at the end of the game is based off of sets achieved per category, this makes you want to compare your own kingdom sets with what sets others are building. So that feeds into your economy, which ends up influencing where you want to end your ranking up. If you want to just save gold, you could stay a mere peasant forever. And who cares what your rank is? Because the only thing that matters in the end of the game is your achievements. This endgame challenge makes games never feel deterministic, as someone can always cinch your win in tying a bunch of these categories at the end of the game. Your whole strategy could also be a little dictated by your faction you play with. There's 12 of these. Now these could do anything from letting you foresee 5 cards instead of 3. Or you could have an extra action at the beginning of decades. These 12 will help with replay value, right? Right? Well, we'll get back to this later in the review. To wrap these pros up, we gotta go back to this game's hook, the simultaneous play. And so while this game has you constantly managing your kingdom with all your cards, and oh my gosh, look at all those mechanics we just covered there, well, this game flows smoothly. Each turn is still just simply 2 actions, so do 2 actions. Play, then you program what stance you want for the next round. Let's go gold, and that's it. In fact, this game ends up feeling like this bustling marketplace of kingdom building activity. This makes the game scale up to 5 without adding much time to the 1.5 average playtime here. Ah yeah, and this is all in that good old medieval theming that makes sense. You got the peasants being the backbone of your labor, and then quarries are popping up as you look forward to the year-end harvest. Oh, and then also, there's a black plague in this game. A black plague with a pandemic on everyone. That's not good for everyone. That's not good for board gamers. Not good for board games. Cons time of Antares Kingdoms. Now let's start with its poor clarity on one of the fundamentals of the game, which is building sets, where there's no reference sheet on here, or even explain on the cards how big those sets are supposed to be. The only place you can find this is in the middle or end of rulebooks, where something so important should have been listed on the player aids that everyone gets. Another area that we were irritated on was the rank hierarchy. This should be on a player aid, or described on the corner of rank cards. Or how about even just including the Trade Master's special ability to draw 2 opportunity cards and pick 1. There was also some real sequencing issues in the rulebook. How about Kingdom Achievement Explanation, where if your set achievement reveals money or supply, what does that mean? Oh, it's not explained at the end of decades. Oh, it's only explained under Kingdom Wealth in step 4. So there should be a reminder this is only relevant in the middle of decades. And then the rule for drawing your hand in each decade is under Setup. So that led to a lot of confusion whether or not you can mulligan if it's the 2nd or 3rd decade. You can, but this is not placed in a way that leads to that thinking. Then, immediately during setup, you can get annoyed how the backs of different decade cards are not different. It can be all too easy to just mix them up while shuffling them together and putting them in their slots. While we're at the cards, the peasant really needs to be written that it cannot help the conquering army. Now, let's get to this faction disappointment we teased a bit earlier. Yeah, okay, let's start with this one, Apex Pyre, that gives you 2 defense as a passive. But that in most cases is weaker than Ender Clan that gives you 3 defense as a reaction. That reaction triggers your Dominion bonus and also prevents you from losing a card because you didn't defend, because now you technically did defend. This 2 defense in Apex Pyre should have been at least higher or scaled up if they want to make it just a permanent passive ability. Or how about this Khalid guild where when you draw you get 3 instead of 2? Okay, that's already good. But then you can discard a card in your hand to gain 1 gold for free? So essentially, this faction just gets bonus gold over everyone else every time they draw. Or how about this dry design, House Mallards, where you start the game with a Dominion, and that Dominion doesn't go into your cost of making future Dominions cost more. Well, okay, that means that this house doesn't give you any real ability. It's just like you get an extra Dominion at the end of the game. Since before the game you draw 3 factions, then pick 1, well, a lot of these factions just aren't really going to get picked much because they either make you weaker or just barely even change your gameplay. Nitpick time. So let's start with the gameplay nitpicks, where it's not unheard of to have the end of decade round to feel a little empty, where you have 1 or 2 actions just go to waste, not do anything. This is because if you play a card in this last round, it only progresses once, meaning that it will probably never be built by the immediate decade end, unless you paid money right after placing to expedite it. But even if it was completed, if it doesn't complete a set, well, it doesn't count for anything when everything gets deleted at decade end. It doesn't make sense to draw cards as an action here because your hand gets discarded right after. Compare this to the Euro Gaia project, where there's skill in foregoing actions and passing around early, because you not only save your varied types of resources for the next round, but you also have first pick of the boosters for the next round, which are temporary benefits. The only resources you get to save here are the gold and opportunities. All these other cards in your hand and field get discarded. So perhaps there could have been some way to save these normal cards as well, at least some of them, so then maybe you save 2 by having to discard 3 cards at the end of the round so that you can carry this over to the next round. Then drawing as a final action would actually do something. Okay, now we get to it. The funky side of this game's hook, the simultaneous play. So this works to make the game flow smoothly, but it comes at some drawbacks. See, it can make the game feel more solitaire than it already is with the low interaction. The set collection system here never ever lets you interfere with each other's kingdoms, hands, etc. It's mostly about the race to get the most sets, which does require you to look over to your opponent's boards a couple times at most a decade. You are never actively given that window to watch what they're doing, so all the more reason to just tunnel in on yourself. Wait, but then what about that 4C mechanic to bluff as you look at these face down cards? Isn't that player interaction? Yes, but then this bluffing is within the context of everyone doing their turns all at the same time. Think of pivotal moments in board games, or maybe even poker, where one guy has a secret card and he's lying about it. And during his turn, he's bluffing and everyone else is reacting to him while it's his turn and they're waiting for him. Here, all that tension can get kind of lost in the flurry of movement that is the simultaneous play. So by all means, the forcing does work to have interaction. It just ends up feeling really casual and loose, as you might catch all the tells on your darn opponent's face, or sometimes you're just so zoned in on yourself to care. Now on to the replayability, and this gets hurt by these 12 factions not being all that interesting or even up to balance with each other, but here we want to talk about the cards you're building sets with. In every single decade, you're using the same exact cards, which really helps the game's learning, and with those achievement paths and different ranks, yeah, they're treated slightly differently by you. If you're a noble, you probably put way more emphasis on these swordsmen. Timing your ranking progression differently from game to game is an interesting thing to try. Oh, but then these achievement paths are the same every game. The year cards will be different from using 9 from a total of 12, so you could have 0 warfares, or 3. And there's plenty of unique cards to play around if you foresaw them. So while foreseeing these early in a decade could vastly change your strategy, well, you had to foresee that, right? And yeah, look at the back of cards. It says Pristine Mountains, and there's this land booklet, so they're going to hopefully introduce more cards into the game and give you more crops besides grain, so we're not just all pent up all the time for not having any vegetables. Now we talked about this game's multiplayer, and on the flip side, there is a solo mode. Well, this mode isn't bad, as you still get all the cool card play, but it is missing out on some of that player interaction that does make this game gel better. Solo has a robot that increases sets at the end of every round based off card flips, which can not only feel unrealistic, but you can't counter their set building during decades. Plus, that robot is never ever going to foresee the next cards. So if you want any knowledge whatsoever here, you have to foresee yourself. 2-player is better on this, but then since bidding for endgame points is based off of first and second place, well, being basically guaranteed either of those with 2 players makes the scoring a little less interesting. Really, it's the more the merrier with Antares Kingdoms, so that way you can increase your chance of someone else foreseeing, so then you can read their face and not have to spend the money yourself. Now for a tentative score on Antares Kingdoms, because this is just a pre-release copy. Look, it even says right here, pre-release edition, yep. And this even came with its own plastic bags for everything, so that was nice. But anyways, stuff is probably bound to get changed in the Kickstarter. So from what we have right here, Antares Kingdoms is going to get a 6 out of 10. It is tentatively above average. This game has a lot of ideas. It has set collection with hand management, a faction ability, a rank trait, one-time use opportunity cards, an endgame challenge, guessing to posture your kingdom for the future, and then also the ability to foresee the future for your own bluffing. And so those simultaneous turns really let all of these things just go smoothly down the hatch in 1.5 hours for even 4 to 5 players, which is quite amazing. But this does come at a bit of the trade-off of none of these ideas being too in-depth. And hey, that's actually fine because of how casual and relaxed Antares Kingdoms generally ends up being. There's no tension of waiting for anyone's turn. No opponent is ever going to attack you. You're not going to be able to keep track of this constantly resetting large central deck that stays the same every decade. It generally feels awesome to anticipate all the new sets your kingdom will be getting for free actions or money. And man, I wish I drew that card that makes all of my grain get built immediately. Or dang, that guy got the opportunity that permanently discounts all dominions. That's okay because dominions are a bit of a toss-up in what is printed on them anyways. There's Greece, a free action, free action, free action, and it's like magic to let your kingdom just keep doing stuff. Neat premise, you can watch your opponent without ever waiting for your turn. But then we do have to point out that this game moves fast. You're likely not getting the feeling of letting turns breathe, and the traditional board game stop and go as you can have discussions between turns or on someone else's crucial turn. But then again, your group could decide to go really hard on the bantering, as after everyone has taken their actions, they're just eyeing each other on what stands to do. But because of the simultaneous play, this is not an actual phase that the game tells you to do together. You could totally be that guy that pretends to take their turn, but is actually just waiting to see what everyone else does first to counterplay them, especially if those opponents have foreseen cards recently. And so that could be an ultimate wrecking ball of a scenario if there's 2 guys who are waiting on each other, right? So, casual game. And while impressive that 60 actions for 5 kingdoms can get condensed under 2 hours, the simultaneousness here feels simultaneous for purely speed's sake. It's not crucially blended with any mechanic. What games normally have simultaneous turns? Party games. So would you rather play that if you really want to go fast all at once? Or what about drafting games like 7 Wonders, where you're all doing one action at once, and you're usually actively keeping track of the draft of people next to you? But none of these examples have the unique set collection paired with the progression system peasants here. So Antares Kingdoms fills this interesting void where it wants more people for more foreseeing and more vibes and banter, and also to make the endgame scoring more dynamic, but then the interaction isn't really a selling part of this game. This is such an interesting recommendation because if you have a group that can use that simultaneous play to banter a lot or to just play this game really quick, you'll have a kingdom builder where the action never seems to stop. My personal score for Antares Kingdoms is going to be a 4 out of 10, below average. Honestly, I don't really have any crucial problems playing this game. I just think it's too long for what it is. When I'm starting off and exhausting that peasant engine and the money starts pouring in, it's really satisfying. Then I enjoy sending conquering armies and playing the little risk game of going greedy all the time whenever it's the time for end of year. But then those peaks come fast within the first decade. So then I'm left to play 2 more decades with the same exact cards and I'm like, I've seen this story before? In fact, I actually wish that turns were slower in the sense that you had more complexity on your turn and maybe had more than 2 actions, like 3 actions or maybe even 4 actions. A huge bug with this is how drawing 2 cards is an action. So if I ever want to draw cards, well, that's half of my turn's primary actions. That kind of blows. I would find it much more enjoyable if you drew 1 card every turn guaranteed. But of course, you'd have to tweak a lot of the balancing to make that work. Then I find the RNG and opportunity cards and the end of year flips to be a bit of a chuckle since the opportunities do all sorts of wild things. And there's just so much variance on what the end of year cards do. And if every single player happens to foresee here, well, there goes that tension of trying to guess what's next, right? I want to fight each other. We have swordsmen and peasants. Why not have them attack your opponents? Eh? But hey, this is just a set collector, right? So there's that internal chirping of fun of just building up your sets, chirping. Wingspan. Huh, Wingspan. But I enjoy this a lot more than Wingspan because I enjoyed this medieval theme much more, and then cards on opponents are way easier to keep track of. Then the multiplayer challenge at the end still gives me some tension, and I can invent all sorts of banter with the face down foreseeing. Yeah, that was Antares Kingdoms. Let me know what you guys think from watching this. And we got our patrons to thank. We got Manuel G, Brian C, Clifford H, Aaron W, Max B, Bora, Jeremy MC, Charlie B, Quintin, SMS, Travis, Rambo Y, Mom CK, Ryan D, Travel L, Matt G, Spinner 71, Ryan J, Brad G, Tiamo Period, Mark A, James M, Evan P, Charles P Jr., Josh J, Basketball, Rado, Sophia, Ryan Z, Colin L, T, Pierce B, Omar F, MY, Ethan P, Bradley J, John C, Galvin V, Jarquez, SS Co, Alex L, Rob R, 722, Dave F, Josh R, Pat, Cyril C, Ilwayne, Kyle M, Amir H, Ryla Spin, Keanu S, Alba Pooks, Kyle M, John P, Nicholas R, Robin, and Andre. We also got Mad That's a Cardboard. We got ZL, Jeff L, Peter Z, and that guy right there. We also got our Mad Lady cardboard. We got Amy. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. We got a Scythe review and a Gloomhaven review coming out soon. Got some more stereotypes planned. See you guys later. Bye-bye.